The knife in my chest wasn't real, but it felt that way as my mother's words sliced through the holiday chatter. Sometimes I wish you were never born. She delivered it casually over chocolate cake, fork suspended midair, eyes fixed on me like I was a stain she'd never quite managed to remove. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like you could disappear and no one would notice, stay with me. Because this is the story of how I made that disappearance permanent, and forced the people who erased me to finally see exactly what they'd lost. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you stick around until the very end, because I'm going to share my honest opinion on whether what I did was right, or if I went too far. Now let me take you back to the beginning. The dining room seemed to tilt sideways as everyone, except me, erupted in laughter. My fingers tightened around the stem of my wine glass until I felt it might snap. Sweat beaded between my shoulder blades while my vision narrowed to pinpoints of light. The candle flames, my mother's diamond earrings, the tears of mirth streaming down my sisters' faces. I set my napkin down with surgical precision and spoke softly into their laughter. Well, Mom, the feeling is mutual. The only difference? I actually have the power to make that wish come true. The room went silent. Silent in the way glass breaks, a crystalline moment suspended before the shatter. My name is Julie, or at least it was. I'm 32 and a high school English teacher. This is the story of how I erased myself from my family and forced them to see exactly what they'd lost. I was the middle child of 3 daughters in a household where invisibility was my inheritance. Lauren, the eldest at 35, had claimed the role of golden achiever. Law degree from Georgetown, partnership track at a prestigious firm, husband named Ethan with corporate connections that made my father's eyes gleam. Victoria, the youngest at 29, was the cherished artist, temperamental, dramatic, perpetually finding herself while living rent-free in our parents' sprawling basement. And then there was me, wedged between their spotlights, existing in the negative space, breathing the leftover air. The pattern had been established early, carved into my bones before I understood what was happening. At 10, I won a district-wide writing competition. The local newspaper came to our house to take my photo. My mother, Judith, glanced at the certificate before turning her attention to Lauren's science project. This might actually get her into Harvard, she murmured, as if I weren't standing there clutching my trophy with trembling hands. When I performed my first solo in the school choir at 12, my father, Patrick, gave only a vague, nice hobby, while Victoria's crude watercolors earned pride of place on the refrigerator for months. My recital program was recycled the next day. By adulthood, my role had calcified. I was the mediator, the peacekeeper, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays while my own blurred together. One year they misspelled my name, Julia, on the cake. The next year they forgot entirely. When I mentioned it at Sunday dinner, Judith said, "Oh, honey, we've all been so busy. We'll do something next week." Next week never came. I was furniture in human form, necessary but unremarkable, present but unseen. That Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to celebrate Lauren's promotion to senior partner, the youngest in her firm's history. Judith had polished the good china and prepared lasagna from scratch, an 8-hour labor of love. Patrick glowed with anticipation before we even sat down. The meal unfolded with excruciating predictability. Lauren regaled us with courtroom victories, her voice rising dramatically as she described decimating opposing counsel. She detailed plans for a vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. Nothing ostentatious, just a modest 4-bedroom with ocean views. Ethan sat beside her, nodding like a proud owner at a dog show. Victoria scrolled through photos of abstract paintings while everyone leaned in with exaggerated interest. "The use of cerulean here represents my emotional breakthrough," she explained, pointing to what looked like a child's finger painting. When my turn came, because they always gave me a turn, a perfunctory acknowledgement, I mentioned Tyler, a shy student with a stutter who'd just won a regional writing competition. I'd spent 6 months staying late, sacrificing weekends, believing in him when no one else did. "That's nice, honey," Judith said absently, her eyes already sliding away. "Lauren, tell us more about that pharmaceutical case." The dismissal stung, but wasn't surprising. I forced the familiar smile, the one I'd perfected through decades of such moments. I became wallpaper again, watching my family's performance from the outside. After dinner, as Patrick raised yet another toast to Lauren, his fourth of the evening, I traced the rim of my glass, half present, wondering why I still subjected myself to this ritual erasure, the weight of 32 years pressed against my ribs with each breath. When dessert arrived, Judith's famous 7-layer chocolate cake, the reminiscing began. Lauren and Victoria launched into stories of childhood pranks, each one with me as the punchline. "Remember when we convinced Julie she was adopted?" Lauren laughed. "We showed her that photo where Mom was holding a darker-haired baby and told her it was proof. She cried for 3 days." Victoria added, wiping tears of mirth. "She even packed a little suitcase." "Poor Julie," Judith chuckled, shaking her head with mock sympathy. Always so gullible, so sensitive. Patrick's laugh was so robust he nearly dropped his fork. "What about the time you two pretended she was invisible for an entire Saturday? She kept trying to get our attention, and we all just looked right through her." I maintained my thin smile, while something inside me began to crystallize, not breaking, but hardening into something diamond-sharp. Then came my mother's coup de grace. Judith leaned forward, setting down her fork with deliberate precision, and said the words that would change everything. "You know what? Sometimes I wish you were never born." The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the laughter exploded. My own mother had just wished me out of existence, and everyone, my sisters, my father, even Ethan, who barely knew me, joined in the chorus of amusement. As if it were the funniest joke they'd ever heard. That's when I spoke. When I let them see, for just one moment, that I was done. The silence after my words was beautiful. Terrifying and beautiful. Patrick's wineglass paused halfway to his lips. Lauren's smile froze. Victoria's eyes went wide. And Judith, my mother, stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in 32 years. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I replayed my mother's words and the chorus of laughter that endorsed them. The truth revealed itself with merciless clarity. They would never see me. Not as a teacher, not as a daughter, not as a person worthy of basic dignity. The weight of this realization should have crushed me. Instead, it crystallized into something sharp-edged and powerful. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling, not with hurt, but with purpose. First, I checked my bank account, $38,000, saved over 15 years of teaching. Not much, but mine. Meanwhile, my sisters had received family loans totaling $70,000, $20,000 to Victoria for art supplies that became a European trip, $50,000 to Lauren for law school, never repaid. I'd been offered nothing because, as Patrick once said, "You have a stable job. You don't need help." My teaching contract ended in December. Perfect timing. I researched positions far from home, Seattle, Portland, Denver. By dawn, 5 applications were submitted. But disappearing wasn't enough. If my mother wished I'd never existed, she would feel the full impact of that wish. Not just my absence, but the collapse of everything I'd silently maintained. I created a document titled The Invisible Daughter and listed every slight, every dismissal, every forgotten birthday. 32 years of evidence. Then I wrote letters, one to each family member, clinical in their precision, devastating in their honesty. To Lauren, I wrote, "You weaponized your success to make me feel small. Every achievement you celebrated was another reminder that mine didn't matter." To Victoria, "Your artistic sensitivity was just selfishness. You took everything and called it self-discovery." To my parents, "You didn't just allow this dynamic. You fed it, nurtured it, and when I needed you most, you chose them, every single time." And to Judith specifically, I wrote, "You gave me life, then spent 32 years wishing you hadn't. Congratulations." Mom, your wish is coming true. For 3 weeks, I maintained appearances while secretly dismantling my life. I sold furniture, donated clothes, and packed essentials. When Seattle West High School offered me a position starting in January, I accepted immediately. The day before my departure, I mailed the letters, Certified. Time to arrive simultaneously. My phone exploded. Lauren called 17 times. Victoria texted, "You're overreacting." Mom didn't mean it. Patrick left voicemails, his voice shaking. Then Judith showed up, pounding on my door. "Julie, please, let's talk about this." I didn't mean it. It was just a joke. I sat motionless on my packed suitcase, listening to her voice break, hearing her finally say my name with desperation instead of dismissal. For once, I had the power. I was making them wait. I was deciding whether the relationship continued. I didn't open the door. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Seattle. As the plane lifted off, I felt something unusual: lightness. The burden of being their emotional support, their mediator, their punchline, all left behind on the tarmac. In Seattle, I became visible. Principal Reynolds called me a breath of fresh air. Colleagues sought my input. Students looked at me, really looked, when I spoke. My small apartment filled with books and plants and sunlight, each item chosen solely for my pleasure. I changed my phone number, my email, every social media account. I became unreachable. I left one connection to my past. Mrs. Henderson, my elderly former neighbor who'd always treated me with genuine kindness. Through her occasional emails, I heard fragments. Thanksgiving was canceled that first year. Lauren and Victoria, without me to buffer their competing egos, clashed violently at a family dinner. Victoria accused Lauren of being a narcissist. Lauren called Victoria a lazy parasite. The argument ended with broken dishes and Victoria moving out. Patrick started drinking heavily. Judith lost 20 pounds, stopped hosting dinners, let the house fall into disrepair. The family photos came down from the walls. Mrs. Henderson told me Judith would sit in my old bedroom sometimes, just staring at the empty space. 6 months passed, then a year. The letters continued arriving at my old address, forwarded until that service expired. I read each one, noting the progression: anger, bargaining, depression. Judith's handwriting grew shakier with each letter. "I didn't mean it," she wrote again and again. "Please come home. Please let me explain." But there was nothing to explain. She'd meant it. Maybe not consciously, but deep down, she'd meant every word. Patrick's notes grew shorter. Lauren's tone is less certain. Victoria stopped writing entirely after her third attempt. On the anniversary of my disappearance, a final envelope arrived, bearing Patrick's handwriting. Inside was a check for $45,000 and a note. "Your inheritance. Early. You were always the strongest of us. Your mother hasn't been the same since you left." Beneath it was a family photo from my childhood. In it, I stood slightly apart, already half erased. Judith had written on the back, "We see you now." Too late. I donated the money to a scholarship fund for overlooked students. The Julie Foundation, I called it. One last ghost of who I'd been. The photo I placed in a drawer. Not displayed, not discarded. A relic of a former life. 2 years after moving, I met Jeremy at a literary festival. He asked about the novel in my hands, and we debated the ending with equal passion. With him, I was never furniture. I was fascinating, essential, and seen. By our second anniversary, we were engaged. Our wedding was small but joyful. My Seattle friend stood witness. His family welcomed me without comparison or qualification. There were no cruel jokes disguised as reminiscence. No casual wishes that I didn't exist. When Mrs. Henderson emailed that Judith had stage 4 cancer, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, but perhaps completion. I called the hospital. "Julie." Judith's voice was thin, disbelieving, breaking on my name. "It's Julia now," I corrected gently. I changed it legally when I moved to Seattle. Julie was the invisible daughter, the one you could ignore, dismiss, erase, the one you wished was never born. Julia is who I became when I finally learned to see myself. The silence stretched between us. 2,000 miles of complicated history hanging in the phone line. "We broke without you," she finally said, her voice cracking with the weight of regret. "You were holding us together, and we never saw it until you were gone. I saw it too late." "I'm so sorry, Julie. Julia, I'm so sorry." "I know," I replied. Neither cruel nor comforting. Simply true. I didn't fly home for her funeral 6 months later. Instead, I lit a candle in Seattle and acknowledged a complicated truth. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is refusing to be erased through radical self-preservation. Lauren reached out through Mrs. Henderson afterward, asking to reconnect. Victoria followed a month later. I declined both with brief, polite emails. That chapter was closed permanently. The door I hadn't opened that day in my apartment would stay closed forever. When our daughter was born the following spring, we named her Hope, because she would never question her place or worth. She would never hear a parent wish she didn't exist. My mother's casual wish had been meant as a curse, but I'd transformed it into a blessing. They lost me, but I found myself. The invisible daughter became a woman fully seen, with a new name and a life they could never touch. So if you've ever been dismissed or erased by those who should cherish you, remember this. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. Your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes walking away is the loudest answer of all. Now, I want to share my honest take on this. I think Julie made the right choice. When people show you who they are for 32 years straight, believe them. Her family didn't just forget a birthday or two. They systematically erased her existence and laughed when she was told she shouldn't have been born. That's not family, that's toxicity. And you know what? She didn't owe them forgiveness just because they finally felt guilty. Sometimes walking away isn't cruel, it's self-preservation. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think she was right to cut them off completely? Or should she have given Victoria, Lauren, Ruth, and Patrick another chance? Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to stay invisible. Thanks for listening, and remember, you deserve to be seen. I'll see you in the next story.